Although I really can't see any more reason I'd find compelling or adequate for me to spend time with releasing things here rather than focusing more on my game development and overall following through on the extremely dark path, if Kimmy continues for much longer to be so unacceptably distant and disrespectful and resistant to embracing the relationship with me that I've always been after having with her, I definitely find it necessary to have a follow-up to my last release. There's no evidence I particularly feel compelled to explicitly mention or provide this time, but I've come to realize there's certainly some additional things that need to be said at this point. So, first of all, it's already been more than a couple days since my last release. Kimmy still hasn't even attempted direct communication with me in any way. I'm still very much open to it and extremely strongly suggest she embraces it quickly before it's seriously too late and there's really no going back on her seriously having pushed me down an extremely dark path in life completely decisively once and for all. I guess I can understand if she's still trying to fully wrap her head around what's going on, if I'm really giving her the utmost benefit of the doubt. I guess I'm just going to have to hope she's not already currently gotten herself in a set of circumstances where she's absolutely unconditionally doomed beyond any realistic possibility of ever redeeming herself. I mean, I'm certainly not going to just assume she's actually pregnant right now and also already past any point of being able to get an abortion. And despite how horribly she's treated me, I still currently have such extremely tender feelings towards her in my heart that I feel like it's still too cruel for me to seriously just assume she's really so far gone she doesn't actually even have the capability of feeling genuine love and respect for me, or that she's had an easy time pushing me away. I feel like I'd still end up doubting myself and regretting it later if I don't give her a little more time before she's really decisively making a decision here once and for all, one way or another. I mean, for all I know, she's dying inside harder than she could ever imagine anything destroying her inside, that she feels like she has to push away the relationship I'm after. Right? There's no way she's actually that delusional that she seriously believes she's going to even survive in the end, much less be at all okay without embracing the kind of relationship with me in a timely manner that she should have been eager to get into all these years with the way she's behaved towards my existence. Right? Who knows? Maybe I'm just way too kind and loving of a person and still have way too much faith in humanity deep down. And instead of being the best part of my life that really restores my faith in humanity and brings me incomparable joy every day for the rest of my life, Kimmy really is the worst part of my life that was truly meant to thoroughly, permanently, irrevocably, insurmountably, undoubtedly, absolutely decimate any even remote possibility or desire for me to ever have even the slightest bit of faith in humanity ever again, literally no matter what, and show me that my life really was always going to go down an extremely dark path, no matter how much I wanted and tried my absolute best to stop that from happening. I guess time will tell, because there isn't much anyone can ever do anymore to really get in my way for very much longer before Kimmy's fully decisively making her decision once and for all, whether anyone likes it or not. Regardless, there's a crucial piece of information about myself that people seem to keep missing. And it's that I really don't give a damn to ever even remotely attempt to see any even remote possibility of any kind of good outcome out of this conflict if I'm seriously not going to get the kind of positive, desirable results I want and deserve that I've stated extremely clearly in absolutely no uncertain terms in this podcast. And since it's still quite uncertain to me, I want to really make sure I've made it extremely clear that if that's really how things are going to be, I seriously will absolutely, unapologetically, unconditionally head down the extremely dark path in all the extremely brutal depth of its darkness, genuinely, without even the slightest bit of doubts, regrets, second-guessing, or hesitation ever again. I see a combination of extremely disrespectful idiots continuing to insult me with ridiculously pathetic attempts to get my attention and try to provoke reactions from me, and at least some also presumably attempting to pursue me privately, communicating with them, or showing any desire or willingness to ever at all compromise my integrity and the authenticity of who I am that I'm extremely clearly expressing and proving through this podcast and my daily behavior. I really don't and will never care what they're thinking or trying to achieve in behaving this way anymore. I just know I'm seriously not putting up with being so unacceptably, extremely, ridiculously, grossly unappreciated and unrewarded for having to deal with people's abusive behavior anymore. And I'm seriously going to go above and beyond to make absolutely certain that's as extremely painfully clear as necessary to anyone still trying to sabotage or delay or somehow mess around with who I am and what I'm doing until they get the message loud and clear through their stupid, disrespectful head, whether or not they have any even remote decency to actually honestly express the reality as such. I have absolutely zero desire or willingness to be close with anyone in the entire world, online or offline, except Kimmy. And even with her, I'm seriously, absolutely, unconditionally done with letting her get close while she constantly keeps me basically at the furthest distance she can, while she's just trying to get as much information and energy from me as possible and take my power from me and abuse me. I seriously thought she'd be a decent human being, recognizing healthy boundaries and need for respecting me at some point, but she really hasn't at all up to this point, and that's why things have come to this podcast existing and being such a brutal attack against her in a very clear way. For years, I saw Kimmy popping off time after time, talking about how she's unpredictable, and it clearly gave her an immense sense of power. But it was always after I did something in her life that clearly was something she didn't predict, and probably nobody else predicted either. I wasn't even trying to be unpredictable. I was always just being myself. Her reactions were always related to her subtly or underhandedly showing me some kind of affection and intensely romantic type attention somehow that gave her that aspect of unpredictability and the power that came with it. I genuinely believed she was expressing genuine feelings for me, and that hope she was serious about taking things between us in the direction I'd always wanted is literally the only reason I put up with continuing to pour my energy into our connection instead of just completely cutting out her and all of her associates from my life long ago. I've never been trying to get stuck chasing anyone. I've had really solid work ethic since before I even knew Kimmy exists, and I was fully prepared and willing to execute on it with extreme focus. I actually even already started silently going in on game development. The first time Kimmy started acting so cruel to me, I felt the need to distance myself from her. But I'd still silently check up on her sometimes, and that's how I noticed her first mental breakdown in public over me. The one where she was on the verge of tears, literally saying she needed motivational videos to get out of bed in the morning because she pushed away someone she really liked. And she's been going to insane lengths to try to keep me stuck chasing her ever since. I was always trying to avoid conflict or drama, but she was always acting extremely careless and reckless and trying to spin everything on me when I'd try to confront her about how toxic and damaging her attitude and behavior was being to my life. If she's not going to start being seriously honest and open and treat me fairly and follow through on clearly expressing her warm and intimate feelings towards me and living the kind of life that she should have been extremely deeply craving having with me in the end as a result already, then we're really going to have an extremely serious and real problem of escalating severity, and people damn well best start realizing and caring about how big that problem really is, and making sure there's serious change in the direction it should be going. Quickly. Otherwise, I'm seriously done trying to at all have even the slightest bit of hope this conflict is ever going to result in anything other than me extremely seriously heading down the extremely dark path in life at full speed without any doubts or regrets or second guessing or hesitation. Genuinely. I'm seriously never moving on from Kimmy. Never. Literally no matter what. And I was seriously never trying to break up with her or leave her. The reality is, she's seriously been treating me absolutely horribly in a manner I find absolutely unacceptable to continue any longer. And despite that, I seriously infinitely prefer her starting to treat me properly in a timely manner rather than forcing me to absolutely unconditionally, thoroughly destroy her life literally at any cost necessary. And those seriously are, always have been, and always will be the only possible options on how this conflict will ultimately end. I absolutely, unconditionally, thoroughly refuse to ever let Kimmy or anyone else pretend like otherwise is, ever was, or ever will be the case. And certainly not to then, on top, act like they're doing anything at all good for me, or in my best interest, or aligned with my wishes, or with my consent in doing so. I seriously, absolutely, unconditionally, thoroughly refuse to ever let her or anyone else try to reduce this conflict to some pathetic drama of any degree. And I'm certainly not saying that and proceeding in this way simply because it sounds good, or out of spite, or jealousy, or any kind of immaturity. There are multiple extremely serious permanent implications for my life as a result of this situation, entirely regardless of how Kimmy or anyone else acts towards me moving forward. I'm not unaware of this, and I've never been, and will never be, at all ignoring them. I've also discussed my very clear awareness of this in absolutely no uncertain terms to Kimmy in front of many of her associates multiple times over the years. So this is far from new information to any of them. Whenever I've spoken or taken actions, ever since the very beginning of my connection with Kimmy, I was never doing so with a lack of self-awareness. I've never been lazy, careless, or naive in anything I've done from the very beginning of our connection. It just might come off like otherwise is the case, because not only do I not have anyone at all standing up for me ever, but I have several highly influential people actively trying to massively warp the narrative of the reality of who I am to make me look crazy and horrible in multiple ways. I'm well aware that multiple aspects of who I am and how I want to live my life go against or differ considerably from the societal norm. Unhinged, delusional, severely mentally ill maniacs want to abuse that extremely badly to try to warp what I'm saying extremely badly, invent some interpretation of what I'm saying that's convenient to them, try extremely seriously, extremely hard to brutally force that on me fully consciously and intentionally against my consent, and then act like I'm a bad person because I won't tolerate that or go along with it for some kind of perceived benefit to myself. Some benefit that I, in reality, was never after or willing to tolerate, and they knew that damn well. Of course, such people are relentlessly, viciously, extremely severely abusing the notion that there's some kind of hidden message between the lines in what I'm saying. Let's take one thing that's probably a pretty good example. I'm never moving on from Kimmy does not mean I will tolerate any kind of treatment I'm forced to experience being inflicted upon me by Kimmy and those associated with her, just so I can be on some kind of good terms with Kimmy or anyone else. Nor is it some kind of reverse psychology trying to get people behaving in ways attempting to pressure or encourage or otherwise attempt to somehow influence or affect my feelings and decision in this regard to ever change. It means I will never even consider opening myself up to allowing anyone else to seriously so much as even just attempt to initiate a romantic or sexual relationship of any capacity with me, much less seek it out myself, entirely regardless of their gender or sex or anything else about them. And I will continue to touch myself to Kimmy frequently forever, even if she antagonizes me so much I'm forced to go down an extremely dark path in life with her as my genuine worst enemy. I absolutely, unconditionally must completely destroy every aspect of the life of, in real life, literally at any cost. But not because she's been at all good to me ever. It's because her body is actually incomparably sexy perfection to me regardless. And so I'd genuinely, literally much rather touch myself to her than even be physically intimate in person with anyone else. Especially after how many times anyone I've ever been close to in the past in any significant way has hurt me in many ways. For me to ever adopt a different attitude, it just validates Kimmy's extremely warped narratives. Considering how Kimmy's repeatedly over the years extremely deviously tried to act like I'm attracted to men and massively faking who I am when I express myself completely honestly and distance myself from her when she's being the most abusive, it clearly seriously puts into question if my efforts towards Kimmy were out of some kind of confusion or insincerity about my gender identity or sexual orientation. Since that most certainly is not at all an accurate reflection of reality, I absolutely unconditionally find it absolutely intolerable to even remotely leave any real room for anyone to ever question it. The reality of my life is that it's just not worth it to even really try to be close to people anymore ever again if Kimmy's seriously set on ultimately betraying me harder than anyone else ever has or will. I already knew, even before I knew Kimmy exists, that anyone even remotely decent is far too few and far between for me to feel like humanity really keeps deserving chances for me to try to be open to love. I've had to be so fiercely, extremely independent after encountering so many psychopaths that I don't really need anything from anyone anyways. So even really good people don't really have anything to offer me in the first place to ever make it at all worthwhile for me. If Kimmy will treat me properly before it's too late, at least Kimmy can give me sexual intimacy I actually really want and could actually really enjoy, and some sense of emotional comfort, even if trust is difficult between us. But any other person, offers me basically nothing I'd ever really even be able to begin to enjoy as any capacity of romantic or sexual partner, regardless. I want it extremely clearly understood that I genuinely mean everything I'm saying in this podcast. Everything, without exception, exactly as I'm stating it on the surface, with no hidden messages or any kind of implications between the lines. Anyone attempting to read any kind of meaning or message into this that is not explicitly a direct reflection of exactly what my words are saying as they convey meaning on the surface for any purpose at any point in time is not understanding what I'm saying clearly and is not acting based on reality if they act at all in accordance to such delusional beliefs. And no matter who is doing so or to what extent or for what reason, it absolutely, unconditionally changes absolutely nothing in regards to who I am, how I feel, my position I'm establishing extremely clearly through this podcast, and the direction I will head in accordingly based on the kind of response I get to it. It seems I've felt extremely compelled to make statements like that over and over now already multiple times on this podcast. And it might seem repetitive or unnecessary to people, but it really isn't. And I really feel the need to explain clearly why to anyone that might still be, for some reason, confused. I'll just take this opportunity to explain what I'm trying to say more clearly instead of repeating just what I've already said before. Just look at what this podcast very quickly became, literally within the first 5 releases. Me having to spend tons of time, often speaking for hours at a time on a single release, just speaking on things that are largely me meticulously breaking down various details that are effectively aspects of a more broadly encompassing topic that a much more simple statement can extremely effectively quickly summarize in a brief statement in relation to them. But because of the extent and scope of lies being purported about me, that's not a realistic option I have available to me. My 5th release on this podcast literally is called What This Is Not, going into great depth, describing a list of a blatantly, extremely severely concerning points I've seen overwhelming reason to thoroughly detail as explicitly not things this podcast is, ever has been, or ever will be trying to achieve. If I hadn't been through the kinds of things I'd been through, something like that would have seemed absolutely ridiculous to me. But that kind of thing has become a pattern of how I've had to handle the severe abuse I've been dealing with, and after how many huge emails I've had to write over the years defending myself in often a largely similar manner, I guess I really shouldn't be surprised it came down to that. I have to meticulously break down various details about what all kinds of things are not in relation to my life, and just saying simple, broadly encompassing statements about things effectively have become grossly ineffective at achieving anything but just coming off extremely fake and immature and careless because of the severity of the false narratives that bad faith actors operating entirely against my consent, wishes, and best interests are attempting to damage my life by perpetuating. And then that inherently becomes an issue in and of itself because speaking at length like that is something that people generally are inclined to perceive as possibly being manipulation, and it also leaves the most possible room for someone malicious to try to pick apart even the slightest weaker choice of wording or possibly unintentionally missing detail extensively addressing some kind of somehow relevant point as if to present it as intentionally worded a certain way or excluded entirely because it exposes a lack of integrity in me somehow or reveals some kind of secret about my life that in reality isn't even remotely true. Let me make sure I've made something abundantly clear. I only ever argue in good faith and if I genuinely care. I only put effort into something if it really matters to me. I'm seriously not doing this for fun, and I seriously do not have never had, and will never have any ulterior motive in my efforts here. If I actually got the relationship I want and deserve with Kimmy in a timely manner, perhaps I could still see purpose in running this podcast discussing, I don't even know exactly what at that point. But until or unless that happens, my sole focus on anything I release here will be achieving an extremely thorough, decisive, irrevocable victory in the extremely serious, relentless existential war being waged against me, just like I've already described rather clearly before, and therefore securing either the relationship with Kimmy I want and deserve in a timely manner before it's really too late, or securing her absolutely unconditional, brutal, complete and total destruction and early demise in real life for what she did to me. It's been a common problem for me in my life that people look at how I carry myself, being self-assured with confidence and decisiveness and whatnot, and they come off to me like they seriously believe I consider myself to be better than them, as if I'm secretly extremely arrogant and just pretend to be humble if they see humbleness in me, or as if I pretend to have level-headed perspectives when I express such perspectives confidently. Whether intentionally with malice or unintentionally with ignorance, they form misinterpretations of my character that I'm discriminating somehow if I put up some kind of resistance towards them, if they're being immature or irrational, as if the resistance I put up towards whatever they were saying or doing is based on some kind of preconceived biases I have based on arbitrary criteria they fall under. I can't imagine this isn't a significant contributor to people finding it so easy to hate on me. So in case people don't understand clearly what's happening with that, or they think I don't know, I'm going to explain it. What it comes down to is that if you see me talking how I do, basically just with research, self-reflection, emotional awareness, and confidence, and you think I believe myself to be better than you somehow, or that I'm discriminating against you based on some arbitrary criteria you fall under, if you face resistance from me, you need therapy. And if you're already in therapy, you need a lot more, and probably with someone a lot better and a lot more aware of the reality of your life than whoever you're currently getting it from. I can explain this in psychology terms. The reality is that if seeing me carry myself the way I do inherently makes you feel attacked or threatened, that means you have deep, possibly hidden insecurities where you lack a strong personal sense of self-esteem. You might be depressed or have social anxiety or anxiety in general. Or you might just generally tend to be a more emotional or impulsive person and not really inclined to researching and meticulously critically evaluating every belief you hold in your mental framework. A person with qualities like this has a significant ego, even if they live a life where they try to generally minimize that ego getting triggered in the way my behavior might trigger it. A lot of people live their lives in ways where their pursuit of emotional comfort over truly deep objective understanding of reality leads to forming habits that facilitate feedback loops, feeding their constant need for confirmation bias to validate their lifestyle. What ends up happening to you is you see what I'm doing and you feel bad about yourself because it becomes basically subconsciously or maybe consciously a painful reminder to you of the kind of place you wish you were at in life with your mental health, which makes you feel inferior to me. And then you're doing emotional projection mixed with deflection, where you flip that feeling because you gaslight yourself into believing that since you feel inferior because of my confidence or charisma or knowledge or whatever it is that you wish you had, I must be trying to make you feel that way. Which you then backwards rationalize into a belief that I must be trying to do that because I feel inherently superior to you and as if you deserve to feel inferior to me. And that's what leads to you imagining whatever kinds of things about me in your head, and then, depending on the amount of confirmation bias your lifestyle facilitates you to pursue to attempt to validate that, your mental health is worsened entirely because of your own obsession with feeling emotionally safe or comfortable at the expense of seeing reality properly. which doesn't mean you shouldn't ever seek feeling comfortable. It just means you need to seek comfort properly, in a way healthily embracing reality instead of ignoring it. Short-term comfort by ignoring issues will lead to long-term exacerbation of those issues, and you're going to learn that and face consequences of that, especially brutally, if you try purporting extremely false things about someone like me long-term. I don't seek out discomfort, and I don't enjoy discomfort, but I'm very much ready and willing to endure even extreme discomfort in order to adequately defend myself against extreme attempts to make me uncomfortable. And that tends to look quite different from what people usually think it looks like. It's also very important to understand the clear distinction between me thinking something and me knowing something. What I mean by this is that if I'm objectively more skilled at, say, computer programming than you are, because I've been doing it since I was 10 years old and you have very little to no experience, that's not a matter of I think I'm better at coding than you. It's a fact that such is the case. It's objective truth. The same way that if you're, better at playing the piano than I am because you were doing it since you were a child, then that's not you thinking it, it's just the truth. I don't get inherently bothered by anyone being objectively better than me at anything because I'm not a person inclined to jealousy, even if it's something I know I'm really good at. If you tend to get jealous and behave towards others with that jealousy driving you, then that's, once again, a mental health issue on your end, not something that's my fault or something I need to fix or change about myself. Again, you need therapy or something. Constantly bullying me or others isn't going to solve your problem. The reality is that I don't inherently discriminate against anyone based on any arbitrary criteria. Neither over something more obvious or major like race or sex, nor over something trivial like whether you pour milk or cereal into your bowl first. And there isn't actually any real evidence to prove otherwise. I never have, and I never will. It's objectively irrational and only lowers your potential for higher quality of life to put excessive weight on the significance of arbitrary things because of whatever bad, or even good, experiences in the past you have with people that possess them. It's not some kind of ego or unjust discrimination for me to have an extremely serious, fundamentally existential issue with demonic, psychotic, extremely fake, and manipulative maniacs that clearly have fully consciously and intentionally went well out of their way to try to extremely seriously, brutally, relentlessly, severely, completely damage and destroy my life in every regard, in every single possible way within their power for their own selfish gain, even going as far as ganging up against me for well over half a decade. That's just called I have real self-respect and self-love, and I'm not mentally ill. The fact that the reactions I tend to get and the extreme lack of attention I get overall despite the insanity of the situation only objectively proves more and more that that's basically a foreign concept to most people in today's society. That really only further objectively proves why humanity truly deserves me to lose all faith in it. I feel like most people would drastically overlook what I just said. Really think about it. I am one of the very few people in this world that actually thoroughly understands what it means to love and respect myself and actually lives their life accordingly, and doesn't try to justify being a piece of trash to other people and lying about it to make myself look good. The overwhelming vast majority of people are inclined to becoming my enemy because they're jealous that I don't hate myself on some level. Many people don't even really realize what they're doing by treating me the way they do until it's too late, if ever. And I'm the one left having to fix the damage they left in my life while they just brush it off like it's another day with another person that came and went in their life. It's easy to listen to the words, but it's immensely harder to live the life. Police are people. Psychologists are people. Judges are people. Lawyers are people. The entire system society functions off of all functions through people. And pretty much all these people become serious enemies against me from the moment they learn I exist, even if I've done nothing to them before and never do anything wrong to them after. And then they try to make me hate myself so they can try to justify their own trash attitude towards life. It's not like my worst enemies don't know this. They're well aware of it, I'm sure. And they viciously, relentlessly abuse it extremely badly. I most certainly shouldn't hate myself for existing because there are unbelievably extremely jealous and hateful pieces of garbage in the world that look at me and decide I seem like a good target to try to turn into a puppet or a pawn for their extremely dark plots of severely abusing innocent victims for selfish gain. I don't deserve to be hated or discriminated against, but that's exactly what these people are doing to me to this very day, while trying to spin it all on me and act like I'm the hateful, discriminatory piece of trash, somehow fully deserving of their extremely horrible abuse. They still to this day completely thoroughly refuse to act in any way whatsoever that actually indicates any of the accusations I'm making against them are at all false. In fact, they only continue to provide me with more and more evidence I'm right about everything with every passing day in multiple ways. I'm refraining from constantly explicitly presenting or listing out the increasing pile of evidence here as things are, because like I said, I'm aware of likely there being illegal contracts criminally misrepresenting the reality of my life and what this podcast is, and also I don't want to leave any room in general for anyone to try to warp my efforts as if there's some kind of disingenuous endeavor towards any kind of ulterior motive. But make no mistake, I'm gathering evidence for what seems to be an inevitable lawsuit I'll be ending up filing against these extremely malicious bad faith actors in the future when I end up suing them for the damages to my life they're inflicting with this extremely unhinged and toxic attitude and behavior towards me they've relentlessly persisted with over a very prolonged period of many years. After taking further time to reflect especially deeply on how and why my situation could be so extremely deeply disturbing as it is, and as I've observed various devious behaviors from my enemies and tried to contemplate on what kind of extremely warped narratives about me they could be attempting to present in order to attempt to justify the extent of horrible cruelty they're relentlessly, increasingly viciously inflicting upon me, I've come to find it especially disrespectful and disturbing that people have ever tried to so extremely massively warp my genuine expression of my gender identity with my female voice, as if it's some kind of role-playing. I feel there's a deep relevance between the concept of discrimination in general and me having multiple personal attributes that deviate significantly from societal norms in ways that a malicious bad faith actor might attempt to extremely deviously abuse, to extremely brutally slander me. I feel compelled to make sure I've meticulously elaborated on my perspective regarding matters of gender identity and sexual orientation. So, there are obviously the male and female genders. There's a really rigid, I guess some may call it traditional interpretation of them, as male being dominant and female being submissive. But I look at reality in a heavily probabilistic way, where there's a lot of possible reasoning among both genders in terms of potential for dominance and submissiveness depending on situations or context. I mostly associate gender identity with physical expression, like how you dress, sound, and the general shape of your body. Based on a really rigid traditional interpretation of genders, I'd say I really don't fit into either male or female, and I guess non-binary seems most suitable. But I don't really like that label because to me, it sort of makes it seem like I either desire to look androgynous, or as if I see my desire to express myself physically as a female as something that degrades its true value to me, as if it's like cross-dressing or being a drag queen or something, instead of just being myself day to day. because of how I see dominance and submission as an ultimately really situational, almost gender agnostic thing. Someone that identifies themselves as non-binary to me just comes off as severely confused about their identity. They might not feel that way about it, and I'm not trying to force my view on anyone, and I really don't know what that label means to different people, but that's just how I interpret things from my perspective. I'm certainly not confused about how I feel about myself at all, so that's why I don't identify with that term. There's also the matter of males typically being attracted to females and females typically being attracted to males, and how me saying I identify female can be misunderstood or misinterpreted, whether based on simply reasonable default assumption or rigid traditional beliefs, as if to be something indicative of me being attracted to men, which is absolutely not the case at all. I've always been extremely unwaveringly certain that I am, always have been, and always will be very much exclusively attracted to very much considerably, irrefutably, perceptibly feminine women, and very much ideally, even specifically cis women, as such that retain their birth genitalia. I genuinely have no inherent problem with homosexuals of either sex. I've seen and personally encountered multiple in my life, and have even been friends with some openly homosexual people before. I've generally gotten along with them perfectly fine, just like anyone else. Even in cases where some tried to violate my boundaries and make pushy advances on me and stuff when they knew I wasn't interested in them like that, I just politely, respectfully declined and distanced myself peacefully without gossiping or starting any kind of drama with anyone. Just like I would have if a straight person I wasn't into made sexual advances on me that made me uncomfortable. I myself literally identify as a lesbian and trans woman. I certainly don't fail to recognize how ridiculously hypocritical it'd be for me to have any inherent issue with homosexual or transgendered people while personally being lesbian and transgendered myself. I guess some might consider me straight for being born male and being attracted to females, even though I identify female. But then again, there's people that just don't respect being transgendered as even a real thing. So I guess all I can really say about that is that disrespect is disrespect, and you're not really any better off in my eyes if you only partially respect my identity. I don't hate any part of myself, and I'm not a hypocrite at all, which I'd say the way I live my life is rather thoroughly demonstrative of in many rather clear ways. It makes absolutely zero real sense to believe I'm discriminatory based on gender or sexual orientation. I've actually never done anything in my life that gives any real evidence to suggest I inherently discriminate against anyone based on any arbitrary criteria, not just gender or sex. Over time, I've witnessed Kimmy say and do various things that seriously suggest she might be seriously sexually attracted to women. Since I've told her long ago that I identify female, and especially since some of these behaviors I've witnessed from her came at points where I made it clear that she basically has to have some significant attraction to women for me to even feel really compatible with her, I really don't know if she's straight or bisexual or lesbian, or pansexual, or what. Regardless, it does not and will never change how I feel about her. I'll still touch myself to her incomparably sexy, perfect body frequently for the rest of my life. I'll still never move on from her. I'll still go down the extremely dark path in life if she's seriously not going to start treating me properly in a timely manner. It's not my fault if she has issues, and I'm not going to ever validate her being messed up and trying to justify hurting me in how she has because of any excuse. If she's really so horrible and unwilling to grow in an actually positive direction, then I'm seriously, absolutely, unconditionally giving up on love and humanity forever and never having any doubts or regrets as I go down an extremely dark path and follow through on all the extremely dark threats I've made, literally at any cost. Being a person generally inclined to loving and being peaceful and stuff doesn't mean people can treat me literally however and literally so horribly it will never even come close to being okay for me ever again, and yet I'm going to ever move on from that or let them feel validated in it. It just means I'm going to show them what happens when you do that to someone like me, who will never become a narcissist myself, but also will never let them get away with what they did as if it is, ever was, or ever will be even remotely okay with me for anyone to do that to me. Not only would that effectively enable this behavior to continue one way or another, regardless of what anyone says or does, since it was so bad that it ever happened to me in the first place, but it also establishes an absolutely unconditionally unacceptable standard for how people will undoubtedly expect to get to treat me in the future. It doesn't matter what anyone says or does. Anyone that ever even seriously attempts to get close to me will know and remember what Kimmy put me through in the back of their mind when they deal with me. It really doesn't matter what kind of person they are and how good they claim to be or might actually be. It will establish some kind of precedent in them that I ever encountered what I did with Kimmy. And if I ever let her even survive ultimately betraying me, that precedent is absolutely unconditionally unacceptable to me. Effectively, whether anyone ever admits it or not, they will constantly question if I'm secretly attracted to men or secretly always wanted to be alone. I'm not stupid or emotionally inept not to recognize this. Neither of these things are, ever have been, or ever will be at all true. Just because I identify female, that doesn't mean I'm at all attracted to men. And just because I'm fully capable of being extremely powerful and showing immense strength even being completely alone, that doesn't mean I'm at all enjoying being so brutally alone and literally never even once in my entire life actually being in a relationship. I most certainly don't have to desperately try to prove my lack of inherent discrimination against homosexuals to the point of drastically overcompensating and needing to be especially supporting of them or willing to entertain any kind of romantic or sexual relations with men. I genuinely am, always have been, and always will be absolutely unconditionally unwilling to at all even entertain the possibility of any kind of romantic or sexual relations with men, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. I'm very much exclusively attracted to women. I do not and will not force myself to try to feel or embrace attraction I don't feel. I never owed it to anyone to behave otherwise, and I always have and always will absolutely unconditionally refuse to ever allow myself to be put in a position where I owe it to anyone to behave otherwise. And I've never even once behaved in any way that should at all leave anyone with any good reason to believe otherwise. It's really the same principle as, my preferences for appearance in a partner. Like I've said, I have an especially strong inclination towards Korean women, especially ones with bigger butts. I've known this from a young age. I don't have to try to force myself to date or touch myself to or entertain romantic or sexual desires or prospects from people that are vastly less attractive to me because they don't meet this criteria, as some kind of overcompensation to try to prove I'm not discriminatory in general. Yes, my sex drive discriminates. Everyone has their own preferences for what they find attractive and who they want sexual intimacy with. I don't owe it to anyone to be attracted to them when I'm not. I don't owe it to anyone to try to force myself. And of course, I don't believe anyone should try to force themselves to feel attracted to me either. but I've never even once, even remotely seriously or consistently or persistently pretended to be attracted to or interested in anyone that I wasn't actually feeling that way towards. Never even once. And I never will, because I've always known that can seriously hurt someone. I've never led anyone on in my entire life. It'd be especially bad if I tried to take advantage of them and get them putting tons of time and energy into caring about me. I wouldn't be able to carry myself with my head held high if I lived my life like that. I'd feel like a pathetic, scummy loser, piece of trash, and I have no reason to taint my energy so severely like that. I'd rather walk around the world with a clear heart, even if humanity hurts me so extremely badly I permanently lose all faith in humanity and go down an extremely dark path. I've already went into what I'd say is plenty adequate depth in regards to my romantic history in this podcast, or should I say, the extremely brutal lack thereof, and the extremely brutal misrepresentation of such by anyone I've ever been cursed to find extremely physically attractive. It seems I'm just extremely unfortunate when it comes to seriously attracting anyone I seriously attract and feel serious attraction to, regardless of what other attributes the woman has. It seems it's just my extreme misfortune that the only people I ever feel seriously physically attracted to are among the worst of psychotic narcissists, entirely regardless of their race or sexual orientation or anything else. One might argue this is some kind of indication of me myself being broken emotionally or spiritually or somehow from some kind of past trauma. But this is mere speculation with no real objective evidence to adequately support it. And in fact, there's plenty of evidence suggesting otherwise. I clearly possess extreme maturity and mental capacity, both on an intellectual and emotional level. I'm clearly extremely consistent and coherent. And beyond just a more simple surface level evaluation of mental stability, I myself actually even have a more in-depth knowledge of psychology to further demonstrate the soundness of my mental health. The loose classification of delusional disorder that the DSM-5 describes literally allows someone being careless and biased enough to classify practically anyone that holds any beliefs about objective reality that significantly deviate from what's perceived in society as normal to be labeled as delusional, which is objectively a grossly inaccurate reflection of the truth and what the word delusional, basically meaning possessing a substantial lack of sense of touch with objective reality in some clearly perceptible way, should actually describe a person as being. The kind of psychology that society gives formal licenses to people for is a clinical psychology aimed at ultimately escalating into psychiatry and prescribing pharmaceuticals and ultimately justifying and fortifying the pharmaceutical industry first and foremost. Not a fundamentally existentially focused and heavily philosophically involved psychology that focuses on the deepest, objectively sound interpretation of the nature of reality and how the mind perceives and interacts with it. If this kind of rhetoric is beyond your comprehension or your capabilities to engage in a good faith intellectual investigation, debate, conversation, whatever you want to call it, about, then your mental facilities clearly are already so blatantly, grossly inadequate to even attempt to gauge my mental health that you shouldn't even be attempting to make any assertions about it. You should recognize doing so clearly would be coming from an extremely ego-driven, heavily emotional place inside you, and not one of significant critical thinking ability. Of course, I'm well aware there are far too many idiots out there that would run their mouth, with their extremely delusional judgments about me regardless, but I'm just going to not go down to their level and even entertain responding. If I let them drag me down to their level, they will beat me with experience. I'll just keep proving I'm well aware of the facts and who I really am. It's ridiculous to claim I'm jealous of women. First of all, my mindset in general doesn't display inclination towards jealousy. I could have been obsessing over all the extremely stupid and toxic, spiteful garbage Kimmy and her associates are doing to try to provoke me into toxic and self-destructive behavior. And instead, I navigated away from that with ease and without hesitation. But even if you want to suggest that's just some kind of extremely calculative fake thing, your argument is still extremely poor to suggest I have any kind of jealousy or inherent discrimination towards women. There's nothing to be jealous of that someone has to endure a bunch of pain and discomfort for 9 months and then the pain of giving birth. If I really wanted children, it's ridiculous to be so ridiculously bitter and spiteful towards women to say I never want children with anyone, rather than just go and find a nice woman who wants children with me and will happily get impregnated by me and just go and impregnate her and have children with her. I'm sure if I wanted that, there are plenty of women in the world that would have wanted that and that I could have done that with already. But I just genuinely don't, and there's absolutely no jealous or discriminatory aspect to that from my end against anyone. And then what? The general jealousy of women having the genitals they do? Also extremely stupid to suggest. If I really wanted, there's surgery for that. I don't want it, and it's not because I'm scared or can't afford it or any other dumb reason. I accept and love myself as how I've been born, and even openly embrace that I feel it works out better for intimacy with a woman for me to keep the genitals I was born with anyways. What's left? Some hallucination that I'm jealous of people with fame and money? First of all, a lot of famous people aren't actually nearly as wealthy as they pretend they are publicly to make themselves seem appealing to try to get close to. It's just a trick they use to manipulate people they want to try to use for selfish gain. That's why people say things like, don't compare yourself to what you see on social media, because a lot of it really is fake. Why would I be jealous of someone pretending they have stuff they don't really have? It's a trap for idiots. If I was an idiot, I wouldn't be creating this podcast I'm creating and exposing the people I'm exposing the way I'm exposing them for taking me for an idiot when they really should have known better. That aside, fame and even actual financial abundance are rather underwhelming to have if you sacrifice your soul to get them. Anyone actually successful knows that real success is acquiring external abundance while preserving your energetic essence and having true freedom over who and what you let into your life. Otherwise, you're just controlled like a puppet by your management company or whoever is your boss, and it's just a glorified 9-to-5 with more payout but also more stress and pain. Why would I be jealous of someone who needs to manipulate others and cause them pain just to feel something? And of course, what they're feeling isn't really a good feeling. I want to make sure I've made something extremely clear here. Ultimately, if Kimmy's ever going to even seriously attempt to force me to validate her being with anyone else besides me, not only will it absolutely unconditionally fail miserably, and I'll make absolutely certain of that no matter what, but it really goes to show how extremely, exceedingly severe the smear campaign against me really is. I've literally extremely clearly stated, just in my last release even, that I will never validate her being with anyone else. Anyone is an all-encompassing term, meaning regardless of any other criteria about them. I shouldn't then have to go elaborate extensively on a whole list of a bunch of different attributes a person could have that I'm all not okay with Kimmy ever being with someone else possessing any of, for what I said to clearly establish its meaning. I shouldn't have to elaborate on a whole list of a bunch of other reasoning why I'm maintaining my position while clearly not doing anything whatsoever, even slightly indicative of me having even the slightest bit of desire or willingness to ever compromise my integrity for anyone or anything, literally no matter what. I shouldn't have to keep repeating over and over that I'm seriously never even considering, even attempting to move on at all from Kimmy, and that I clearly, genuinely have always loved her as much as I've been saying I always have, and never had any ulterior motives in pursuing her how I have. Instead, I'm being forced to climb mountain after mountain and jump through hoop after hoop of nightmarish, constantly having to rack my brain, trying to listen to my intuition and carefully evaluate Kimmy and her friends' online activity to attempt to discern what extremely messed up warped narrative garbage they're attempting to slander and criminally impersonate me as to suggest I'm behaving in certain ways to validate their behavior with. And then meticulously break down every single detail that I can try to discern might be relevant to diffuse the relentless existential assault they're inflicting upon me, just so my entire life isn't brutally destroyed with lies, even after everything I've already done to try to protect myself. And then they try to come up with even more lies, even after I diffuse tons of traps and lies, so they can try to endlessly deny me of getting the life I want and deserve that allows me to even more thoroughly prove their lies wrong, even when I clearly am going to immense lengths to prove everything only more so every day. I've been forced to endure this extremely miserable, brutally tormenting nightmare for well over half a decade now. Anyone trying to act like I'm discriminating against anyone else in what I'm doing here, they should be the ones that have to publicly, extremely clearly, directly address me and defend themselves for their attitude and behavior. Because the reality is, they are the ones clearly, extremely brutally discriminating against me. And no matter if they do, if I don't get the life I want and deserve with Kimmy in a timely manner, even whatever anyone might try to do to make it up to me, I do not and will never care, and it does not and will never even remotely make things okay or even slightly better, at least as far as I'll ever be concerned.